so let's get started on the Small Size Transponster Tote. This one I'm using what the pattern calls for, which is woven exterior and woven lining, and then a vinyl for my exterior contrast. So we're just going to jump right in and get started. Step number one, we are going to place and fuse the main top stabilizer and the side panel top stabilizer to these pieces. So what we want to do for that is we want to measure 1/2 inch down from the top on the wrong side, and I'm going to draw a line, and this is just a chalk pencil, and I'll do that on both exterior main panels. And then on both exterior side panels. Alright, and then I'm going to fuse the stabilizer in place, centered over these marks. So the side panel stabilizer is cut smaller so that it won't be in the seam allowance, because the main panel one will be, and that will just get too bulky to have all of the stabilizer in the seam allowance. So I'm going to fuse those in place, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we got all of our stabilizer pieces fused in place. Now we are going to take the two, I'm going to set those aside. I'm taking the lining and exterior slip pocket pieces, and I'm going to place them wrong sides together. And I'm just going to place a few clips to hold them together. And we're just going to baste around all 4 edges. And I will baste this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This exterior fabric that I'm using today is from So Dolce, and the lining is from Rocker by D Stash. This vinyl contrast that I'm using is from Mormino, and the thread I'm using is Fairy Floss sewing string from Wizardry Stitchery. So I'm just basting this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It doesn't have to be precise. Just make sure it doesn't go larger than 1/4 inch really. Alright, now we're going to use double-sided tape to adhere the slip pocket accent piece in place, and then we'll stitch it on. This is 1/8 inch double-sided tape that I also got from Wizardry. The snips that I use are from mormino.com. Let's see. I'm going to mark a line. This is a 1 inch tall piece, the pocket accent, so I'm going to mark a line down the center just to help me make sure that I have it even when I fold it over the top of the pocket. mark that well on the back of the vinyl. I think it's good enough though. So I'm just going to kind of stick that on so it's nice and straight and halfway at that line, and then fold this over, and it should be evenly folded over on the front and back. And then you can also throw a couple clips on this just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to sew it on using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the raw edge. Okay, now I'm going to get an exterior main panel. I can choose which one I want if the pocket placement looks better on one over the other. So, it's like I don't really like it on this one because that bat's like repeated right above it. So I'll go with this panel where it's not like that. You could fussy cut this so that it didn't look like out of place. So now we need to find the center. So I'm just going to fold that in half and kind of finger crease to mark the center, and I'll do that along the top also. And then same thing with the exterior main panel. And then we'll place this pocket in place. And you can use some double-sided tape if you want on the back, which I actually think I might do that just to make sure that I place it properly and that it stays put. You could use pins, obviously. I really use my tape a lot. I probably could not use anything and just hold it in place and it would be fine, but so if you haven't tried double-sided tape yet, it's very, very helpful, especially when sewing like vinyl and leather and things where you can't use pins. But I really find that I use it like all the time. I use it for zippers a lot, and it definitely helps there. Okay, so I'll just peel the paper backing off. And then just make sure I line up the centers. And stick that down. And then I'm just going to take my roller and make sure it's centered. So this is the small size that we're making. We are 3 1/4 inches away on that side, and a little bit more than 3 1/4 on this side, so I'm going to scoot it over just a touch. Now it's uncentered the other way. Hold on. It really should be centered at 3 1/4. Okay, that looks good. 3 1/4 on both sides. Okay, now I'm going to base this in place, just down one side across the bottom and back up the other side. And I'll just use a 1/4 inch seam allowance again for that. And I only have this slip pocket on the front side of the bag, but if you wanted to, you can make 2 of these and put one on the front and the back. It's totally an option. Okay, now we're going to make our handles. So you'll take your 2 handle pieces. We're going to measure and mark the center point, which vertically and horizontally. So first, I'm just going to fold it kind of to find the center. Don't know how well my blue chalk will mark on this. Not too bad. Okay, and then we want to find the center vertically. This is 1.5 inch wide webbing, so 3/4 of an inch is half. And then we just want to make a 5-inch mark. So that would be 2.5 inches from the center on each side. And that did not mark. Oops. 2.5 inches from. That didn't mark very well either, so use something that will mark on your. I can see it. I don't know if it shows up in the video. All right, now I'm going to fold each side into that line and top stitch it down or baste it using just an 1/8 inch seam allowance from the edge of the webbing. I don't know if I want to use tape to hold this in place. I think I might just go in and start sewing. Just make sure that you start at that 5-inch mark. And then you'll stop at the other mark. Alright, and then we'll repeat that with the other side of the handle. I'm going to actually use a few clips to hold that down. That'll be easier. And I'm just meeting up with the other side that's already sewn to the line. Alright, and now we're going to take one of the handle accent pieces, and I want to center it over this sewn section of the handle. So let me find my center again while it's folded and mark it somehow. Alright, and then I'm also going to find the center of this piece. Which is two and a quarter, so 1 1/8. So that's the center, and then the center this way is going to be 2 3/4 of an inch from the side, and that's for all sizes. So I'm just kind of marking the center like that, and then I don't know if I want to use tape on this or just clips. So we're going to place that so that it's centered like this. And then each side will be folded over like that. You may want to slide it a little bit off center so that the top portion of the vinyl folds almost all the way to the other side. And then obviously you can place clips on this or tape to hold it together. And then I'm going to sew all the way around this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. This part can be a little bit thick, so definitely keep in mind what vinyl your sewing machine can handle. If you have a domestic machine, make sure you're using a thinner vinyl, which moremino.com has several options that are domestic friendly. I believe the one I'm using today is from their Luxe vinyl collection, which I believe is domestic friendly. Alright, so then you should have this, which will end up being the handle. So it gives you like a nice smaller section to grab, but we still have the look of the thick webbing. And we're going to repeat that now with the other handle. Okay, that marks a lot better. So I want to make a 5-inch mark again, so we're going to measure 3/4 of an inch from the edge. and then 2.5 inches to either side. Alright, and then I want to fold the webbing into that line and use some of my sewing clips to hold it in place. Alright, and then we want to start sewing right at the end of that line and then stop right at the other end of the line. And we're just going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from the side of the webbing. And then make sure you stop right at the other mark, or the other end of that line. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that on the other side. Start sewing where the other line started. Ow. Alright, and then we'll repeat with the vinyl. So first 1 1/8 inch marks the center, which I don't really know how super important that is now, but I'm still gonna do it. And then 2 1/4 inches, I think. 2 3/4. That looks better. I swear there's dog hair on everything right now. My dog doesn't even come in this room and her hair is everywhere. And it's gross. Alright, so we'll do the same thing where I fold it so that the layer on top is going all the way around. and then clip it in place. And this is why we're using a non-fraying material for this. Okay. Now let's top stitch that in place. Again, using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. This thread is just so pretty. So you can also, when you're using this thick polyester thread, when you cut your threads, you can use a lighter to singe the end so that they don't come undone, and then you don't have any like little thread pieces hanging. So just do that carefully if you do that. Alright, so now we're going to place these on our main panels. So I like to put the handle so that this edge is facing down. So I'll do that on each of them. This should be, we want to measure in 2.5 inches from each side. If you mark this, make sure you're using a heat erasable or some type of erasable marking tool. Alright, so I got this chalk pencil from Weft and Warp Co. We're going to measure 2.5 inches in and 6.5 inches up. And this is for the small size. The measurements are listed separately for each size. And I'm just going to draw that line. So it's very faint, but it's there. And then I'm going to use some tape to hold that down. Maybe I'll place it on here directly. So I'm going to also measure 6.5 inches from the bottom of the webbing and make a mark, because that will be our top stitching mark. Just make sure that whatever you're marking it with is removable. And then I'm also going to place tape on the other side of my webbing that will be over the pocket. And you could also use pins or clips or whatever to hold this in place. You don't have to use tape for everything. think I'm going to just do one side at a time. Alright, I'm going to stick that in place, and then I'm going to check again to make sure it's 2.5 inches and that it's straight. And then let me stick down the other side of it. And this should overlap the pocket by about 1/2 inch. Okay, and then we'll repeat that with the other side of the handle. So the small size of this bag is meant to just be like a real tiny cute little tote. I feel like I've seen the like really small ones being kind of popular right now. So this might be like too small for my daily use bag, but that's why we included the medium size. So it's not quite a medium, not quite a small, and I feel like a good daily handbag size, but the small size is like just a real cute little tote when you don't need to carry a lot, or it would be good for children. Pocket might end up being too narrow to use for most things, but and then you can kind of bend your handle once it's in place, your vinyl portion. And we just want it to be like little cute little grab handles, so that's fine that it's so small. So now we'll just go ahead and top stitch this handle in place using a 1/8 inch seam allowance, and then directly across the marked line at the top. Actually start here. And when I cut my webbing, I singe the ends with a lighter so that the webbing doesn't fray. I would also like to add that the foot that I have on my sewing machine right now is a narrow foot from mormino.com, which I believe she just said that she's ordering more of them. But it's like it's really nice because you can use it for most things, like for zippers and such. You don't have to switch out necessarily to a zipper foot. And I found that since I've put this needle or this foot on my machine, I haven't switched. Alright, you may want to carefully backstitch across the top line for added security, or you can place a rivet in the handle beneath the stitching. Also, I didn't add that all of my fabric pieces are interfaced with Pixie Fuse Premium, which you can get from Royal Pixie Custom Fabrics. It's a little bit thicker than Shape Flex and a really nice quality. and the price is good. Alright, and then we will repeat that process to attach the handles to the back of the bag. And I'm just going to kind of work my vinyl here so that it has the curve in it for the top of the handle. And it will end up being, where this stabilizer is, will end up being the top of the bag. So it will be like that. The handles will be that high above the top of the bag. So let's go ahead and stick our other handle on. Alright, and then this will be 2.5 inches from the side and 6.5 inches up from the bottom. And then the webbing is 1.5 inches wide, so really I can measure 1.5 inches over from that and mark out my other line so I can place all of the tape directly on the main panel. Okay, this side. Make sure that that's 2.5 inches from the side. Looks good. Now I'll go ahead and top stitch this handle in place. I'm using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat that on this side. Alright, both of the exterior panels are done now, and we can set those aside. We will draw a line down the center of each crossbody connector lengthwise. This ruler is also from mormyknow.com. I just buy everything from mormyknow.com. Feels that way. Ooh, Lauren needs to start carrying her own thread. I would also buy that from her. So I think this is maybe 1/2 inch wide. But this, you can just stick a strip right down the center, and that will save time. Alright, so I think I've seen tags that say like made with love and cat hair or something, and I feel like I need one that says with dog hair, because there's dog hair just stuck on everything. Okay, we're going to top stitch these down each folded edge. I'm using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to fold these over the D-rings. And baste the ends closed. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance for that. Make sure that the back side where the two raw edges meet is folded to the inside when you do this. Alright, we're going to baste these onto the exterior side panels. Centered at the top. So I'm just going to finger press to find the center. And then actually put a little snip there so I don't lose where the center is. And then I'll just place my crossbody connector centered over that mark and baste it in place. Alright, now we're going to mark our darts out. So when you cut these, you don't cut out the darts. After you cut the pattern pieces, you can cut out the dart placement marks. And then on the wrong side of the exterior side panels and the lining side panels, we're just going to go ahead and mark out those dart placement lines. So unfortunately I just sewed all of the darts and that was cut off the video. So I went and I realized that I didn't fuse the Decovil light to the wrong side of each of the lining main panels. So I went ahead and did that, and then to sew the darts, you're just folding directly along the center of the dart, matching up the two lines from the dart, and then you sew directly over them, back stitching at the start and stop, and then I trimmed off the excess to about 1/4 of an inch. And I did that on every exterior and lining dart. So what you have, it looks like this from the other side. And I also discussed an alternative if you don't have Decovil Heavy or Decovil Light, that Royal Pixie Custom Fabrics sells a Pixie Fuse Heavy that is very similar, or it's not similar. It's a woven interfacing still, but it's heavy and it's stiff. So it could be used in place of Decovil Light in this bag anyway. I think it would be fine. So now what we're doing is fusing or sewing the bottom main panel, the bottom exterior, to the exterior mains. So I just go ahead and place them right sides together, and I'm going to sew this in place using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I did sew the darts on both exterior side panels and both lining side panels. And the most important part is just to make sure that you back stitch well at the start and stop of each dart line that you sew. Alright, then we're going to press the bottom panel away from the main panel with the seam allowance toward the wrong side of the bottom panel, and I'm just going to top stitch this using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and my stitch length is set to 5. So I do tend, like when I used to sew on my domestic machine, I would generally use a shorter stitch length. I think the thinner that your thread is, a long stitch length just doesn't seem secure. So if you're sewing on a domestic, you may want to top stitch using a 4, and do your sewing using like a 3.5 millimeter. Whoops. And also the way that this bag is, the top inch and, I guess the top 1.5 becomes the seam allowance, and then also the top like lining portion of the bag. So your lining panels are much shorter than your exterior panels, and that is correct. That's how it should be. Alright, so now we'll top stitch this side. We need to fold the seam allowance toward the bottom panel. I kind of sewed through my Decovil Heavy there, and that's what's making it harder. to press that the right way. So you really want to sew right next to the deco veil heavy, not through it, but it happens, not a big deal. Okay, now we're going to sew on the side panel. So I need to find the center of the bottom panel on each short end, and I'll just kind of snip in to the seam allowance portion ever so slightly. Make sure that your snip is like, you know, like a 1/4 of an inch or so. You don't want to snip past where that seam allowance is. And then on the exterior side panels, I'm going to do the same thing. Fold this in to find the center. And just make a snip there. Alright, and then we will match the center marks, right sides together, and clip. And I'll just place a couple clips along the bottom, and then we're going to match up the top corners next. And just place a couple clips there on the sides, and then we'll ease down around the curves after both of the tops are matched up. And I think I might sew these side panels in and then break for lunch because I'm hungry. And it is 1 o'clock. So the corners should fit real smoothly. If there are any wrinkles along the edge, then that's fine, as long as you're not sewing over wrinkles where the seam allowance is. The seam allowance is 1/2 inch here. So the line that needs to match up really is the 1/2 inch mark, not the very edge of the fabric. So if you see there are some wrinkles here, but it's nice and smooth where the seam allowance is, 1/2 inch in from the raw edge. Try to make sure that my darts are the seam allowance behind the darts are both facing in the same direction. All right, and then we're going to sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you don't have a narrow foot here, a zipper foot could be helpful, especially like on an industrial machine where the zipper foot gets you really close. But I do suggest getting like a narrow foot for sewing oval bottoms into bags or sewing in gussets. The closer you can get to the seam allowance with the least amount of presser foot next to it is very helpful. So I just kind of rotate the bag up and around. I'm gonna grab my stiletto. Alright, so I have my stiletto tool here that's a seam ripper on the other side. I got this from Hannah Woodworking, and Becky Hannah actually hand turns all of these on a lathe, and this is made out of Buckeye burl or something. It's quite impressive, really. She has pens and cutting boards, and I love just looking at all of the products that she makes and sells. They're amazing. But I like to use my stiletto to hold the fabric together close to the needle where I don't want my fingers to be, or where my fingers won't fit maybe, and the stiletto fits in there nicely. I've also used, for years and years, I used a small screwdriver for this. So if you don't have a stiletto, then you can use anything else that you have. But the stiletto is nice because it is pointy, so it will grip the fabric. And I rotate the bag around by putting my hand inside the open end. And I really just like to take my time and make sure that everything stays aligned as it should. And this is probably why I'm so slow. Alright, we'll go ahead and get the other side panel attached. And also here's where you'd want to check to make sure that you don't have any puckers sewn into the seam allowance. If you do, then you want to go ahead and seam rip to fix those before you trim any seam allowances down. So match up the bottom seams. And then the top corners. My glitter sewing clips are also from moremeknow.com. No surprise, huh? Okay, go ahead and sew this end on, also using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, so just double check all of your seam allowances to make sure that you don't have any puckering, and then we can go ahead and trim that seam allowance down to about 1/4 of an inch, between 1/8 and 1/4, I suppose. So the exterior is now assembled, and we'll go ahead and assemble the lining in the same manner. Alright, so to assemble the lining, we are going to mark a box on the wrong side of one of the interior zipper pocket panels. That is one inch down from the top, 1 inch in from each of the ends, and measures 1/2 inch wide. So I have this ruler from moremeknow.com that measures that out. And 7 inches happens to be one of the size pockets that she has a ruler for. So now we're going to find the center of the pocket piece, and we'll find the center of our lining panel, lining main. We're going to place these wrong sides together, and I want the top of the pocket panel to be 1/2 inch down from the top of the lining main. And then we'll just sew all the way around this box using a short stitch length. So I'll use probably a 3.5 for this. And you can pin these together if you want to. If they seem like they're staying together okay without it, then I'm not going to bother. Stop at the corner with your needle in the down position and rotate to sew up the end, and then stop in the corner again. Some people will sew 2 straight lines and leave the end open, which helps the corners not to pucker when you turn it. And I just back stitch at the start and stop of each. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to, you can use a rotary cutter for this or your scissors. We want to cut through the center of the box that we just sewed around. It's not funny. And then cut from the end of that line into each of the corners, but be careful not to trim through your stitching. Or at least to turn the box right side out. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my iron, but I'm going to turn or flip the interior zipper pocket panel through the box so that they're wrong sides together, and then we'll just have a box. Alright, once the box is pressed nice and flat, we're going to take our zipper, and then on the back of this, on the interior zipper pocket panel, around the box, we want to place 2 strips of 1/8 inch double-sided tape. If you're using number 3 zipper, you might want to make sure that the zipper tape is going to completely cover the double-sided tape. So just something to keep in mind, because the tape is not as wide. So number 5 zipper has 1 1/4 inch wide zipper tape, and number 3 zipper is only 1 inch wide. So I want my zipper to close. Yeah. So I'm just kind of lining up. I usually do one side at a time. So just center the zipper teeth within the box. Alright, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around the zipper, back stitching at the start and stop. I generally always start kind of not at the corner, but beneath the start of the box. Alright, also if you have tags that you want to use, you either would want to sew that on probably now, or if you sew it on the exterior, wherever you want to put it, just don't forget. I generally like to put mine beneath the interior zipper pocket, So I have tags that I bought from Heartwood and Hide, which they are amazing to work with, and their tags are great quality. There can be a bit of a wait the first time you order, but it's worth it. So I also have this template that's used for tag placement. I don't know if the chalk is marking or not. That was stupid. Okay, so I just used some double-sided tape on the back of my tag. And then those little dots, each corner of the tag should just cover the dot that you made. All right, and then I just top stitch that on. I like to leave my threads long, and I pull them through to the back and tie it off. And I have yet to figure out what stitch length is like exactly perfect for these. Whoops. So I don't back stitch. Kind of stop as close as you can to the same hole that you started in. Leave your threads a little bit longer, and then come to the back. If you just pull on each of those threads from the back, and you'll see a loop, which is the tail from the front, and then you can just pull that loop, and then all the threads are on the back, and then you can tie a knot in them. This would probably be easier if I cut these all the same length. And then you can just melt the threads and kind of stick them down to the wrong side, and then that will stay to the back, and you don't have any back stitching on that tag. Alright, so we want to make sure that we leave this zipper unzipped. I'll actually zip it halfway for this. We're going to place the two pocket interior zipper pocket panels right sides together and flip all the way around the edges. We're going to leave the bottom edge open. Alright, and then we're going to fold that back and start sewing. And we just fold the main panel out of the way as we sew around the interior zipper panels. And I'm just sewing these together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Which doesn't have to be super precise. Alright, and then I'm going to trim this seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, once that's completed, we will repeat the same process to attach the bottom panel to the 2 lining main panels. So, right sides together, matching along edge of the bottom panel to the bottom edge of the interior zipper, or the interior main panel, and then we're going to sew that together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you should be sewing right next to the Decoville Heavy, or I'm sorry, Decoville Light that is on the lining panel. Alright, and then you're going to press the bottom panel away from the main panel with the seam allowance pressed toward the bottom panel. See, it's here. And then we're going to top stitch that using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Just making sure that my main panels, my lining main panels, are both facing the right direction. If they're directional, you don't want to have one upside down. So on the wrong side of each of the 4 zipper panels, I'm going to measure and make a mark that is 1 inch from each end. This narrow ruler that I'm using is also from moremeknow.com. It's 8 inches by 1 inch. And it's just super handy. I actually have, I think, 3 of them now, but they're just nice to keep next to the sewing machine. Alright, now once I've measured 1 inch from each end, I'm just going to go to my iron and press each of the ends under by 1/2 inch, which would be folding them to the line I just made. Alright, so I have each of the short edges pressed under by 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to take the end of my zipper. I'm going to trim it so it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to separate the 2 sides. I'm going to use a lighter. I fold the end of the zipper like that so that it is at a 90-degree angle. On the back you can see an angle, and here the zipper tape goes straight across on the front. So now if I take my lighter on this raw edge over here, and be careful not to burn yourself because it does get hot, but you can just melt the raw edges together. You can also just fold it back and sew it in place. But I find that the lighter really works well. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side of the zipper. Okay, once we have that done, we're going to take an exterior zipper panel and place it right side up, and then place our zipper on top, right side down. You want the end of the zipper to be a 1/4 inch or so from the end. And we're just going to clip this in place. Can help to move the zipper pull out of the way. And then just go ahead and sew that in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance or less. This is just kind of a basting stitch. Alright, and now we want to place one of the lining panels right side together with the exterior panel, matching all of the sides. And we'll just go ahead and pin those together, clip them together. You want to make sure that both of the ends line up, so if one of them seems to be a little bit shorter, adjust it or fold it more so that they match. They should be the same length. All right, and then we'll go ahead and sew that on using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So this can be helpful to use a zipper foot for this portion so that you can sew nice and close to your zipper. All right, and then we're going to press the 2 zipper panels away from the zipper and wrong sides together. You can iron this if you need to, or just finger press it. And then I like to use some clips along the raw edge to hold it in place. And then we're just going to top stitch those 2 panels together using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and then we'll baste the raw edges together as well, also just using an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, let's repeat that to attach the other 2 zipper panels to the other side of the zipper. And the zipper panels and the zipper portion, this is also short because of the way the ends of the bags curve into the bag. So we want the zipper panels to be out of the way of that. I'm just kind of clipping this in place with the zipper closed so that I can make sure both sides of the zipper panel are going to line up, and then I can open my zipper to make it easier. And if you want to, on this part, instead of doing what I do and basting it and then putting the lining panel on and sewing, you could just layer all 3, the zipper and both zipper panels at once, and just sew it in place. right, and then 3/8 of an inch. To just sew the 2 panels together. Alright, and then we'll flip both of these away from the zipper and wrong sides together. And it helps to close the zipper for this part. Alright, and then we'll just top stitch all the way around this one using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Things are a little squeaky here. I think I might need to oil my machine. This fairy floss sewing string is just super pretty. Goes so well with that fabric. Alright, now we want to go ahead and add the zipper tab to the end. So I already went ahead and I pressed this, so you make a mark down the long side of the back vertically, fold each of the long raw edges into that mark and press, and then fold each of the short ends up by 1/2 inch and press, and then fold in half, and then you should have a square. Mine's a little more rectangle than square, but that's fine. I'm going to just use some double-sided tape. And I'm just going to kind of stick it around the end of my zipper. You can use, obviously you can use clips for this. And then just center the zipper inside of the zipper tab. I think I'm making this harder than it needs to be. Alright, and then we'll just top stitch around this tab using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and trim all the threads. Alright, the zipper panel is done, so now we're going to baste it to the lining. So we want the lining main panel that has the zipper attached. The center is marked. I previously marked it. I'm just going to put a little snip there so I can find it again. And then I'm also going to mark the center on each side of the zipper panels. And just put like a little snip there. The seam allowance here will be 1/2 inch, so just make sure that you keep your snip less than 1/2 inch. And then also I want to mark the center of my other lining main panel. And while we're at it, I'm going to mark the center of the bottom, the side of the beam, the center of the small side of the bottom panel. Okay, so now we're going to, the lining main that has the zipper attached, which I actually want that unzipped, we're going to center the zipper panel lining side down, exterior side up, matching the centers. And I'm going to baste that in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we'll repeat and attach the zipper panel to the other lining main. Match the centers. And also when the centers are matched, the sides of your lining main panels should line up. So just make sure that everything seems to be aligned properly. And then baste that also using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Oops. All right, now we're going to, I like to unzip this because it just makes it easier, but we're going to repeat the same process as we did with the exterior to attach the side panels to the lining. So first I'm going to find the bottom, the center of the bottom of each of the side panels, and just put a small little snip there to mark it. And I'm finding that by lining up the 2 darts. Okay, now that those are marked, we're going to match the bottom centers up first and place a clip, and then a clip on either side of it, and then we will match the top corners. And then we'll go ahead and ease down around the corners and clip this all together. And remember that it should match up around the 1/2 inch mark, not necessarily around the raw edge, but the seam line. And this time I actually am going to fold my darts. When I sewed the exterior, my darts were pointing downward. Here I'm going to fold my darts upward. And that way when I put the lining and the exterior together, hopefully it will reduce some of the bulk. Because we'll be sewing around those side panels at the end. We top stitch them. So any bulk that can be reduced there is good. Alright, and then we'll just go ahead and sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The worst thing about making videos while I'm sewing is keeping my head out of view of the camera. So I'm like leaned back sewing, and it's difficult to not like be right up over what I'm doing. So I think it was a little easier for me before when I had the side angle, but a lot of people complained about that in my videos, but it was easier for me to sew like that. Hopefully my bobbin thread doesn't run out while I'm doing this, because I have not changed it yet. Been on one bobbin the whole time so far. But this generally seems to be the kind of time when the bobbin chooses to run out, so we'll see. Fingers crossed. Make sure that your zipper panel, your interior zipper pocket panels are out of the way as you do this. And also, if you're on the side that has the top zipper panel, make sure that that's out of your seam as well, that you're not catching the end of your zipper or anything. If you use staples, this would be a good use of staples. Alright, now we'll go ahead and repeat that with the other side. So we'll place this right sides together, match up the bottom center. On the top. If you're using like a waterproof canvas or something for the lining, you might want to reconsider the Decoville light. I'm not sure that it would be needed. Definitely if you use, at least for the small and medium size, I'm not sure about the larger two, but if you use like a vinyl for the exterior, waterproof canvas for the lining, I would definitely skip the Decoville light. I would still use the Decoville heavy pieces because they do help to kind of shape the final bag. Alright, so let's go ahead and sew around this one now. Make sure you watch your zipper tab and that your interior zipper pocket is out of the way. always stop to adjust with the needle in the down position so that the bag doesn't shift. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and check my seam, make sure everything looks good, and then trim these seam allowances down to somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. Alright, so we're going to turn the lining inside out, or yeah, we want the right side of the fabric to be on the outside. Alright, I think we're going to make the tail on the zipper a lot longer than this so that we don't have this problem. So I want the side that has the zipper to be the back, so the front has the slip pocket. So I want to place the lining inside of the exterior with the zipper matching up to the side that doesn't have the slip pocket. The lining is considerably shorter than the exterior, and that is correct. I'm going to first just match up the 4 corners and place a couple clips around them. This side is going to be a little bit tricky because of that zipper. So really it might work out to just put the zipper pull on after sewing the two together. So you'll just have to be patient on this end. I guess I didn't think that through. So I'm just matching this up all the way around the top as best I can. When I get to the end, I'll just have to kind of manipulate it there. So we're just going to start though right here, and I'll do the end last. And in the final pattern I will have, this is still in testing by the way, but I will have this zipper panel longer, or the zipper length longer, so that this won't be an issue. We're going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And here you should be sewing directly next to the Decoville Heavy, but not through it. When you need to make any adjustments, stop with your needle in the down position. When you sew over the crossbody connector on the side panel, you can backstitch over that if you choose to. And then also, once we're finished, we can put a rivet through that. Alright, again, you will not have this issue at the end because I will make sure that the zipper is cut to a longer length. Alright, make sure you backstitch when you get to the end. And we're not going to trim the seam allowance down except for at the 4 corners to reduce bulk when we top stitch that portion. So, let me see, demonstrate here. I'm just going to curve in down toward the top and trim it back like that. And that will just help to reduce some of the bulk in the sides when we do our final top stitch. I should have adhered my Decoville light in my press, and I did not. I used my iron, so it's kind of peeling up. Alright, now we're going to turn the whole bag right side out through the opening in the interior zipper pocket, which I will not do on camera because I need to do it in my lap. So, alright, so I turned the whole bag right side out, and then I pressed around the top edge, which should turn under right at the end of that Decoville Heavy. So you have 1 inch of the exterior folding toward the inside. The zipper panels are pressed up, and that seam allowance there is going down. So first, I just want to make sure that everything is laying nice. We want to top stitch 1/8 of an inch beneath this seam, but we need to watch out for things like our handles and our zipper panel. I generally top stitch my bags inside out because that's easier for me. So let's see how this works out. I'm going to turn the whole bag inside out. This again will be easier for you with a longer zipper, so I will definitely make sure that I make the zipper longer in the final pattern. And when we do this top stitching, we want to make sure that we don't sew over the handles. And it's just going to kind of be like a blob. So thankfully that Decoville being along the top panel really makes that part easier to turn there. So I will start, and we want to make sure that these are also folded out of the way when we do our top stitch. I'm going to do, I think I'm going to do my top stitch first, just because I think that will be easier. And I'm actually going to place some sewing clips on it to hold everything in place. The zipper length is going to make me regret that the whole way. If you find that you want like a shorter zipper tail, you could make it shorter and just separate this and then put the pole on when you're done. Which is definitely crossing my mind right now. Alright, so I'm going to start my top stitch at this end. I'm going to fold the crossbody connector back out of my way. So I'm going to fold it up just for this part. And then we'll do the lower top stitch second. So right now I'm top stitching this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to start here. Stitch length is 5. Back stitch a few stitches, and we'll just sew all the way around the top of the bag using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. I get my seam guide washi tape from yeah, Soulful Therapy, I think. Yes, it's from Soulful Therapy. So I'm just really taking my time, making sure my zipper panels are not getting caught here. continuously as you sew around, stop and check to make sure the placement of your zipper panels and the zipper tab and the crossbody connectors, and just make sure that everything stays out of the way. The handles. Alright, one top stitch down. Now we're going to do a second line of top stitching that will be 1/8 of an inch beneath. We want our zipper panels to be facing up, like that. We want the handles to be down. We want the zipper tabs to be up. So this top stitch will be 1/8 of an inch beneath this seam, which should be, that seam should be 1 inch from the top raw, or the top folded edge. So as long as everything is correct, we should be able to top stitch from the right side 1 1/4 inch down, which would be this 10 mark I have here. So if you don't have a 1 1/4 inch mark on your sewing machine, just use washi tape or some other tape to measure and mark that out. Or you could sew from the wrong side, from the lining side. I just would rather sew from the exterior, so that way if one line is going to be not completely straight, it's going to be on the lining side of my bag. And the same as the same as the last top stitch, you just want to check and make sure the placement of everything is correct the entire way as you sew around. Alright, this part can be a little hard to see. Make sure you're sewing straight because the zipper gets in the way. Still make sure that you don't sew through your zipper tab. Make sure that your D-rings are pulled up out of the way. Here you're sewing through the bottom of that connector, so that portion can get a little bit thicker. If you're using a domestic, you might have to hand crank through some of these parts. But that's also where it's important to use a vinyl that you know that your machine can handle. Also, if you wanted to, instead of making a mark on your sewing machine of where well, I think I'm using 1 1/4, 1 1/8 inch seam allowance would be, you can always measure it out and actually mark it on your bag, as long as it's something that chalk or whatever that you can wipe away when you're done. Whew. All right, let's go ahead and turn this back right side out. It's not too bad, my stitch line. But again, like if it's not going to be completely straight on one side, I'd rather have it be on the lining side than on the exterior side, so. And we will give the whole entire bag like a nice good press when we're done too. So some of these wrinkles, and I have some adhesive stuck to my vinyl, which I should be able to wipe off with like an alcohol wipe. All right, so right now this is what we have. It's a little bit crunched up. Super cute though. Totally enjoying this. The zipper panels are up. We call those perky panels. Your crossbody connectors are here, so they're not like on the outside. Now, if you choose, you can go ahead and place a rivet through this. We don't need to do that right this second though. So right now what we're going to do is push the lining and exterior side panels. I'm going to make sure that the seams are aligned very well. The darts should be lined up. And we're going to pinch around the seam like this. So if you've made my Consuela clutch, this is the same process that is used for that pattern, except for here we're going to use, I think I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'll have to check. And just make sure that the seams are smooth, that you don't have any wrinkles on the inside or outside as you do this, and just pinch around that seam the whole way. On the lining side where you have the Decoville light, that should help because it is going right up to the seams in these spots, but not, it's not sewn into the other seam, but it should help you to fold around the side panels. And this seam is one that you'll want to be very careful sewing, since you will see it, the bobbin side of it, on the exterior of your bag. If you're using a domestic, you may want to use woven for your base panel, your bottom panel, to prevent some of that bulk there. It's these bottom corners that are the bulkiest area. Okay, so once it's all pinched together like that, the side panels kind of curve in, and we will top stitch all the way around this. 1/2 inch seam allowance, so all the way around this. And remember that your bobbin thread is visible on the exterior of your bag, so you want to make sure that you're using a coordinating bobbin thread. And you also want to make sure that your tension is right so that your bobbin stitches don't look weird. And just flow this nice and slow and steady. The stiletto can be used here to hold things together. Take it slow around these bottom curves. The bottom corners are kind of the most difficult areas. There's a fly in here that won't get out of my face. Alright, make sure that doesn't look completely horrible. Fix it if you need to. I think it's good enough. Alright, and then we'll repeat that with the other side. And by the time you get to this point, you'll be ready to be done. So the good thing is that you are almost done. Alright, so I went ahead and clipped around the other side, and then we'll go ahead and top stitch this also using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, make sure that looks decent. Now, we're almost done. We're going to pull the bottom of the interior zipper pocket out and press the raw edges inside by 1/4 inch or so. This doesn't have to be super exact. If you watch Lauren Mormino's videos, she does it differently so that it's like already folded. So really probably do it her way. Alright, now we're going to, alright, we're going to go ahead and top stitch this together using an 1/8 inch seam allowance. tuck the pocket inside. All right, now here, optionally, if you choose to, you can install a rivet through each of these to kind of help hold them in place. Totally optional. And let's see, pocket is done. Now we just need to make the crossbody strap. If you're not making a crossbody strap, you'd be done right now. So obviously it needs pressed, but totally cute. And see why we make the zipper panel so small is because of the way the ends fold in. And that way the zipper panel is not in the way and it's not making the top of the bag look weird. It's got a nice curve to it. These are pushed in. So let's make our crossbody strap now. Alright, so somehow I managed to not have 1.5 inch hardware in rainbow, so we're just going to use nickel for this, and then I'll probably switch it out later. So to start, we're going to cut a 4-inch piece of the 60-inch crossbody webbing. I'm going to singe the ends with a lighter. Anytime you cut nylon webbing, you always want to singe the ends of it, because it will come unraveled and it will pull out of the seam allowance. Alright, so whatever your method is of heat sealing. So now I'm going to slide one of the 1-inch swivel clips. I've got my strap tab stabilizer centered and fused in place in the center of the strap tab. This will be another place where I use some of my double-sided tape. And I don't like to put it down so low that the hardware will stick on it, because then it doesn't swivel properly. Or so I'll go ahead and peel that off. We're going to take our 4-inch piece of webbing and fold it around the rectangle ring and baste the ends together. I lost my snips. Alright, and now we're going to place the webbing about halfway into the connector here. And then just match the sides up of the snap tab, or nope, strap tab. You can place clips on this if you choose to. And I actually am going to move this down a little bit. So I want it to be where the edge of the webbing there. I want it to be like that, so that the rectangle ring is just coming out of the top. And then I'm going to top stitch all the way around this using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. get as close to the swivel clip as you can and rotate. And we have the stabilizer in there so that way it's not just a single piece of vinyl at the bottom. Okay, so we've got that. So midway through filming the strap, my battery died. So we have this part assembled here, which is one of the crossbody strap tabs and the 4-inch piece of webbing and rectangle ring. I do realize that my hardware doesn't match, but I didn't have rainbow in 1.5-inch rectangles or sliders, and I don't know why. Okay, so now to continue this, on the other end, or on the one short end of the long piece, we just fold that over the center bar of the strap slider, and we're just going to sew 2 lines in that to secure it in place. And I just stitch across, back stitch, and then stitch back across one time. And then we'll repeat that one more time closer to the edge of the webbing there. That was sloppy. Alright, trim all my threads. After we sew that on, we want to take the rectangle ring and slide it onto the webbing and make sure that all of this is not twisted. So we have our rectangle ring, we have the raw edge where the webbing was folded facing up, and then we bring the other short end over the center bar. So now the raw edge of that webbing is inside, and the other end we have this. Alright, and now we will take our other crossbody strap tab and place the swivel clip on it, and then I'm just going to use some of our double-sided tape so I just use a few pieces of that, or a couple pieces. And then place the strap within the slider, or within the strap tab, and I make sure that it's centered from left to right, and then usually about down to where the widest part of that strap tab ends. And then fold the other side in place. Alright, and now we will sew around this the same way that we sewed around the other one. So I just start here. I'm going to sew all the way across and then back stitch all the way, and then sew one more line across. And I'm using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I stop with my needle in the down position to turn corners. I get as close as I can to the swivel clip at the end. And then I have like a scrap of leather here to protect the hardware and vinyl in the back so that the foot doesn't tear it up. Alright, so the entire bag is now finished. So, where is it? So here we have the Small Size Transponster Tote. Your two D-rings are here, so if you want to use the crossbody strap, you will just clip it on to those two D-rings. You can adjust it down to be just a shoulder strap if that's what you prefer, or you can take it off and not use it at all. The zipper top closure, recessed zipper or internal zipper pocket. If you wanted to, you could add slip pockets on the other side. So that's the beauty of making your own bags, is that you can add whatever you want. So that's the finished bag. I hope you enjoyed this. All right, thanks for watching.